Hi guys, welcome to my first ever crocheting video where you will see me crochet an entire patchwork cardigan for the first time. Yes, this is inspired by the Harry Styles cardigan that trended last year in 2020, but I changed the colors to make it a little bit more personal to me. You can find a bunch of inspo pics from Pinterest like I did and create your own as well. Just a quick disclaimer, this video is not really a tutorial. This is more of my process and how I was able to make things work for me. I'll also be leaving links to all the videos that I found helpful in the description box below, so if you need help, you can check out those links and hopefully those videos will help you too. With that being said, let's get on with the video. So for the materials, I used milk cotton yarn in the colors dark blue, cyan, dark pink, rose pink, and yellow. And I used a 4.5 and 5mm crochet hook, and since I wanted my cardigan to have a button band, I used 5 of these yellow buttons, and I also used some darning needles. For my cardigan, I have 1 back panel, 2 front panels, and 2 panels for the sleeves. And for my patches, I just chained 19 for my foundation chain and did half double crochets for 14 rows to give me a 12 by 12 centimeter square. And once you put all the different panels together, you will add the bottom ribbing, sleeve cuffs, and button band, and you will have your finished cardigan. So now, let's get into crocheting the squares. I started off with the dark pink yarn first, and my initial plan was actually to use a 4.5mm hook for this entire project, but I ended up changing to a 5mm hook after this first batch of squares. When I first tried making them, I actually had to unravel the yarn a couple of times just to get the sizing right, and if I'm being honest, a lot of my squares were actually smaller than 12 centimeters, but I didn't really mind as long as the size difference wasn't so big. This was also my first time crocheting with milk cotton yarn because all my life I've only bought those acrylic yarns that you find in National Bookstore here in the Philippines, and I never realized how rough they actually were compared to the soft texture of the milk cotton yarn. And I also bought all of my supplies on Shopee, so I'll also be leaving those links in the description box. Moving on, I crocheted the yellow squares next, and this is when I started to use the 5mm hook. And this might sound really confusing, but since I have 4 batches of different colored squares, at first my plan was to do half double crochet for 2 of the colors and double crochet for the other 2 colors, but I ended up liking the look of the half double crochet more, so after the yellow batch I used the half double crochet for the rest of the colors. If any of you were wondering, I actually started crocheting a few years ago. My mom introduced it to me when I was younger, so I'm no longer new to it. I know the basic stitches and all that, but I don't crochet regularly. I pretty much just do it whenever I want to, which I haven't been getting into these days. Well, not until this cardigan. I've never crocheted anything complex before. It's mostly just small items. When I was younger, I used to make phone cases and headbands in which I would give to my relatives and stuff. So this cardigan is quite a big step. It's pretty much the biggest thing I've ever crocheted so far, but I thought a patchwork cardigan would be fun to make because it's pretty much just crocheting a ton of squares and sewing them all together to make something that you can wear. A few weeks before starting this project, I actually came across a YouTube video of a girl crocheting a patchwork cardigan that was inspired by the one that Harry Styles wore. And after that, I just started seeing more and more of these types of videos, and something just ignited in me and motivated me to make my own. And I thought, I know how to crochet. I can do this. Why not go for it while I'm still on summer break? So, as if I wasn't already stressing about my future, I decided, yep, I'm going to make a cardigan. I'm taking this challenge upon myself and I am determined to finish it. So I watched some tutorials, did my research. I planned out how I wanted my cardigan to look like and made all the measurements and just hope that the final product would fit me as good as I had imagined it would. The hardest thing about the planning process was probably choosing the color palette, because being the indecisive person that I am, I didn't know what colors I wanted to go for. So I just chose colors that I thought would look good together, and after a week of planning, I decided to seal the deal and order a bunch of crocheting supplies online, which included a pack of crochet hooks and nearly 20 skeins of yarn. So here you can see me crocheting my last batch of squares, and since the Harry Styles cardigan had those black and red patches, I decided to mimic that, but I did a houndstooth pattern instead. To make it, it's basically just an alternating pattern of single crochets and double crochets while switching colors between each row. There's definitely a lot of things you can do with this pattern. I've also been wanting to make a houndstooth sweater vest. I think those are really cute, so maybe I'll work on that sometime in the future. After 2 weeks, I was able to make 16 dark pink, 16 yellow, 16 cyan, 15 rose pink, and 14 of the houndstooth pattern, which gives me 77 patches in total. Now I'm pretty slow at crocheting. I don't know if 2 weeks is considered a long time to finish all of the squares, but I remember crocheting for almost the entirety of my days. Before I went to bed, I would crochet, and when I wake up the next day, I would just start crocheting again. For me, there's just something so addicting to it. Like, once I crochet, I just want to keep doing it and not stop. Is it just me? Maybe it is just me, but I find it very calming and pretty much therapeutic almost to just sit there, have a movie or a YouTube video on, and just crochet. Anyways, after laying out all of my squares, I can start sewing them to create my panels. So you can do this in many ways. I saw from different videos that other people used a crochet hook to slip stitch the squares, which is perfectly fine, but I opted to use a darning needle to sew the squares instead. Here's a closer look of how I'm sewing the patches. Since I am left-handed when it comes to sewing, I'm going from the left square to the right. And since these squares have their own tails from when I crocheted them individually, I'm also sewing those as I sew along the patches so that I wouldn't have to worry about weaving them in later on. To make the stitches less visible, I only insert my needle into the back loops of a stitch, and I make sure to use either one of the colors of the two squares I'm sewing together. I'm also sewing the patches row by row. Basically, I'm sewing all the squares in one row, then I sew all the squares in another row, and once I have all the rows done, I then sew them together to make a whole panel. An example is how I'm doing the front panel here. I know this is technically a column, not a row, but let's just pretend that it is. So I first sewed the squares into two separate columns or rows, then I attached the two columns together to form one panel. After sewing the 2 sleeves and front panels, all I have left was the back panel. I didn't realize how big the back panel actually was. At this point, I just really wanted to get it done because I was literally sewing non-stop for 2 days and I was already getting so tired of stitching up all these squares. I just wanted to finish it as quickly as I could so that I could move on to the next step. Once I finished sewing all the panels, I then attached them together to form a cardigan. And as you can see, my desk was way too small for the entire cardigan to fit, so I had to fold it in different ways just to be able to sew the seams properly. It was a struggle, but I made it through. After sewing the final pieces together, I flipped it right side out and I actually had something I could wear now. So here's me trying it on for the first time, and I was really surprised with how well it fits me. I was actually worried that it might have been too big, but everything worked out and the measurements I made were fortunately right. I kind of look like a grandma in this clip, but it's fine. The cardigan will get better. Now that I had the body of the cardigan, the next thing on my agenda was to crochet the ribbing. Getting the dark blue yarn, I chained 11 and made single crochets as my foundation chain for my sleeve cuffs. Before starting the next row, I chained 1 and turned my work. And to create that ribbing effect, all you have to do is single crochet in the back loops of each stitch. And that's pretty much it. You basically just have to repeat that in every row until you have the length that you want. I just crocheted enough rows until the cuff was long enough to fit around my wrist. Now here's how I attach the ends to make a circle. Check which side of the foundation chain is curling upwards. For me, it's this one over here. Now fold your cuff and you want to make sure that that curl is on the outside. To attach the ends, insert your hook into the first foundation chain and through your working yarn on the other side and pull through. To make the stitches match up, insert your hook into the back loop of that last stitch and pull through to make a slip stitch. Now all you have to do is slip stitch 1 foundation chain into 1 back loop from the last row of single crochets we did until you reach the end of your sleeve cuff. Once you've done that, chain 1 and cut your yarn to fasten off. Now this is the inside of our sleeve cuff, but once you turn it inside out, you won't even notice the seam we just made. I'm really grateful that I found this tutorial and I was really impressed when it worked out for me. So you guys should try it out, it's pretty cool. So since I had 2 sleeves, I just did the exact same thing for my second sleeve cuff. Next, I made the bottom ribbing with the yellow yarn. Since I wanted it to be wider than the sleeve cuffs, I chained 13 for my foundation chain. It's nearly the same concept with crocheting in the back loops only, but instead of single crochets, I did half double crochets instead. I don't know how many rows I crocheted, but I just made sure that the ribbing would be long enough to cover the entire bottom edge of my cardigan. My mom said that the ribbing actually looked like those lasagna noodles, and I kind of agree with her. Once you've done a couple of rows, your half double crochet ribbing should look like this, and I think it looks really pretty. Bringing back the dark blue yarn, the last thing I had to crochet was the button band. I actually had a lot of trial and errors for this one, but in the final run, I changed back to a 4.5mm hook. So first, I chained 7 and did single crochets in each chain. I wanted my button band to have that ribbing effect as well, so same as the sleeve cuffs, I made single crochets but in the back loops only of each stitch for rows 2 and 3. Once I got to my 4th row, I made the first buttonhole. I made single crochet back loops only in the first 2 stitches of this row, and then I chained 2 and skipped 2 stitches and did single crochets again in the back loops of the last 2 stitches. I chained 1 and turned my work for the next row and continued making single crochets in the back loops only until I reached my second buttonhole. I made each buttonhole around 10 centimeters apart, which was around 17 rows of single crochets. In the end, I made a total of 5 buttonholes, but you could do more if you want. Once I finished the last hole, I just continued to make rows of single crochets until I had the length of the inner edge of my cardigan. Making sure that my cardigan was facing right side out, I got my darning needle once again and attached the sleeve cuffs first. I inserted my needle into several stitches on the end of the sleeve, and then inserted my needle into one stitch on the cuff. This bunches up the fabric to achieve that puff sleeve look that I wanted. I just made sure to pull tightly enough so that my stitches won't be visible from the outside. Here you can see that the puff sleeve was already starting to take shape. I continued sewing around the sleeve and made sure to fasten off on the inside of the cardigan and sewed in the tails afterwards. I repeated the same process for the other sleeve and moved on to the bottom ribbing. I attached this in a similar way, except I only inserted my needle into one stitch on the cardigan and one stitch on the ribbing. This way it doesn't bunch up the fabric and gives me a flat hem instead. Once I was nearing the end of the bottom edge of my cardigan, I realized that my ribbing was way too long. Luckily, this end was where I fastened off, so it was still possible for me to unravel the yarn. Then I just crocheted the last row of stitches again so that it would have a cleaner look instead of those awkward loops you have when you unravel your work. The final piece I had to attach was the button band. I sewed it the same way as the ribbing, nothing new. I just made sure that the buttonholes would be on my left once I wore the cardigan. Just like the original Harry Styles cardigan, I could have added a collar, but I just decided not to. And as you can see, the button band was also longer than I had anticipated, so just like the bottom ribbing, I unraveled the yarn and crocheted the last row again. I weaved in all the existing tails I had left, and then I reached the last and final step, sewing the buttons. I just made sure to align the buttons with the buttonholes and used the smallest darning needle I had to sew the buttons with the dark blue yarn. And that's pretty much it. After 23 long days, I was finally able to finish my first ever crocheted cardigan. Aside from the pain my hands felt when I was crocheting and the extreme amount of time I spent for this project, I would say that I really enjoyed this entire experience. If you've been wanting to learn how to crochet, or you already know how and you've been wanting to make your own things, this is your sign to do it. I think that the end results are definitely worth it, and being able to wear something that you made yourself is just an amazing feeling. I hope this video has helped you, and I hope you enjoyed watching. If you want to see more content from me, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and who knows, maybe I'll make some more crocheting videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye guys!